My sister's jealousy made her lie about me, but I had the proof to turn the tables. So just admit it, my mom says, hands wrapped so tightly around her mug the veins in her fingers stand out blue. You told the solicitor to cut your sister out. You wanted the house for yourself. She says it in our living room, the one with the beige leather couch and the same framed school photos lining the wall from 10 years ago. My dad is in his recliner, jaw clenched, looking everywhere but at me. My sister Claire is curled into the corner of the couch, eyes red, tissue in hand, looking like a wounded saint. My heart is pounding so hard I can feel my pulse in my ears. I stare at all of them. At the printed email they've laid on the coffee table like Exhibit A. At the WhatsApp screenshots Claire has reluctantly provided. At the way my mom's lip trembles whenever she glances at Claire. I can taste metal in my mouth. No, I say, and my voice comes out flat, like it's had all the air ironed out of it. I didn't. That's not what I said. At all. Claire sniffles louder, like on cue, and dabs under her eye. You're twisting things, she whispers. I can't believe you're still lying. And something in me that's been bending under her narrative for years finally stops bending. I take a breath, reach into my bag for the folder I brought, and feel the edges of the printed pages against my fingertips like the rim of a shield. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind that made our suburb feel smaller than usual. I just turned 30. Claire is 32. Growing up, those 2 years felt like an ocean I was always trying to swim across. She was the one who did everything first bra, first party, first boyfriend, first screaming match with our parents over curfew. I was the quiet one, the kid with a book at the kitchen table, the one whose report cards all had some version of conscientious on them. If you'd asked my parents when we were kids, they would have said we were very different but close. What they meant was, Claire created storms. I learned to mop up after them. Some of my earliest memories of her are like little cautionary tales. She'd rip the heads off my dolls if I didn't let her borrow them. If she broke something, she'd cry that it was an accident and somehow there'd be a story about how I'd distracted her. Mom would frown at us both and say, "You're the older one, Claire. You should know better." But the consequences never really stuck. Claire had this way of looking at you with huge wet eyes that made adults soften. I never had that. I had quiet rage and a stomachache. As teenagers, our roles solidified. Claire threw herself into drama literally, the school drama club, and also the general concept. She was pretty in a sharp way, all cheekbones and eyeliner, and people gravitated towards her. She dated boys who played guitar badly and wrote her poems that sounded like stolen song lyrics. I did my homework, joined the science club, and occasionally got invited to things as Claire's sister. When a boy I liked kissed me at a party, he dumped me a week later and turned up to formal with Claire on his arm. "It just happened," she said afterwards, swiping on mascara in the bathroom while I sat on the toilet seat, numb. You can't control who you click with. Mom's response when I went to her in tears was, "He wasn't worth it if he could do that to you." Which was true, but sidestepped the part where my sister had done it too. The pattern followed us into adulthood. It just put on adult clothes. Claire went to art school, dropped out, got a job at a clothing store, dated a guy who lived in a share house with mold in the bathroom. I went to uni, studied occupational therapy, and moved back home to save money, which meant I was still there to witness the never-ending carousel of Claire's crises. Lost job, broken lease, car written off through no fault of her own when she drove it into a bollard while on her phone. Each time my parents rallied resources, they technically didn't have small loans. My dad doing mates rates labor on whatever she'd ruined. Mom canceling hair appointments to babysit her dog. I love my parents. I need to say that, because none of this makes sense if you imagine them as cartoon villains. They're good people. They worked hard. They cared. They also had this blind spot the size of Claire's ego when it came to their firstborn. To them, she was fragile and brilliant and one stroke of luck away from finally making it. To me, she was a talented manipulator who'd learned early that if she cried first, she could control the narrative. When I bought my first flat, a tiny, slightly damp one-bed in a brick block 15 minutes from their place, it was the first time I felt like the word responsible might be something I chose rather than something I had inflicted on me. I'd scrimped and taken extra shifts at the hospital and said no to holidays for years. The day the mortgage was approved, I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and cried. Not from sadness, just from this weird, overwhelming relief. My parents came over with a bottle of cheap champagne and a toolbox. Dad helped me mount shelves. Mom fussed about the lack of curtains and kept saying, It's so grown up. Claire turned up late, looked around, and said, "It's cute," in a tone people use for puppies. Then, in front of everyone, she said, "Wow, they really gave you a mortgage? Remember when you used to melt down if your train was 5 minutes late?" It was a joke, technically. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, because that's what you do when you've been trained to appease. Underneath all of that, there was this low-level hum of comparison. My parents would point out our differences like they were items on a menu. "Your sister's so creative," Mom would say when Claire posted a new painting on Instagram. "You're so steady," she'd add to me. "You're good with money." It wasn't malicious. But when Claire's various gigs didn't pan out, there was an unspoken expectation that I, the steady one, would quietly fill the gaps, cover Mom's car service when she'd paid Claire's rent, pick up extra groceries just this week because Dad had helped Claire with a bond. I didn't mind helping them. I minded being the automatic solution. The whole solicitor thing started because my parents' roof literally started leaking. My dad is one of those men who thinks he can fix anything with a YouTube tutorial and a trip to Bunnings. But even he had to admit that brown water stains on the ceiling were beyond him. They got a quote for repairs that made Mom go silent at the kitchen table for a long minute. "We don't have that sitting around," she said quietly. I suggested gently that they talk to someone about their finances. Not because I wanted control, but because I could see them spinning plates that were about to smash. "You've both worked your whole lives," I said. "You shouldn't be taking on high-interest debt at 60. Maybe talk to a financial planner. Or a lawyer if you're thinking of downsizing in the next few years." Dad grunted something non-committal. Mom said, "We don't need a stranger telling us what to do with our own house." A week later, though, she texted me, "Can you come over on your day off? Want to talk about that solicitor idea?" So I did. I sat at their dining table with my laptop, Googling firms with decent reviews. We chose 1 5 suburbs over, someone independent my colleague had used. "I'll come with you if you want," I offered. Dad immediately said no. Mom surprisingly said, "Actually, that might be helpful. You can take notes." Claire wasn't in that conversation. She knew about the roof. She'd been around the day the ceiling stain first appeared, but she hadn't been invited to the logistics. That, I think, is where the jealousy started properly bubbling. The day of the solicitor appointment, I met them there after a morning shift. The office smelled like coffee and photocopier paper. A woman in her 50s with sensible shoes and a sharper-than-she-let-on voice walked us through their options. Reverse mortgages. Bad idea. Downsizing. Complicated emotionally and financially. Or setting up some kind of plan now so things were clearer later. She asked if they had wills. They did from when we were kids. "You might want to update those," she said. "Life circumstances change." Mom looked at me when she said that. I shrugged. "You should do whatever feels fair to you," I said. "Don't worry about us. We're adults." The solicitor asked if they wanted to leave the house to us equally. Dad said, "Of course, 50-50. That's obvious." I nodded and repeated, "Yes, equal." Partly because Mom had hinted months before that maybe Claire needed more because I was better with money. I'd pushed back then. "If you start carving it up based on who you think is more competent, you're going to blow us up," I'd said. "Just split it evenly and let us work things out like grown-ups." The solicitor made notes. She suggested they think about appointing someone as power of attorney for financial decisions if they ever couldn't manage. Dad immediately said my name. "Sophie deals with that sort of thing all day at the hospital," he said. "She's organized." I felt my stomach drop. I liked the trust, but I could already hear Claire's reaction. "You don't have to decide that today," I said quickly. "You can even appoint both of us jointly if you want." We left it at that. No papers signed yet, just conversation started. On the drive home, Mom was quiet. Dad seemed in good spirits, talking about the coffee machine in the waiting room. I went back to my flat thinking, for once, that I'd done the right thing without stepping on too many landmines. Then Claire found out. I don't know if they told her directly or if she overheard, but 2 days later I got a text from her. "So you've finally made your move." I stared at it, confused. I wrote back. "You didn't waste any time, did you?" she replied. "Couldn't wait to get your claws into the house." My heart started jackhammering. "What are you talking about?" I typed. "They asked me to come. I told them to keep everything 50-50. She left me on red. That Friday, Mom messaged, "Come for lunch Sunday? Need to chat." The wording made my stomach twist. I went anyway because that's what you do when you're the good daughter. Which brings us back to the living room, to the printed email on the table. The email, according to my parents, was from me to the solicitor, sent the day after the appointment. It read, in summary, that I felt it would be best if the house was left solely in my name because my sister isn't responsible, and that I'd discussed it with Mom and Dad and they agreed. It looked like it had come from my Gmail. My name was on it. The WhatsApp screenshots were apparently me messaging Claire, saying things like, "You'll get your share when I decide you're not going to blow it on some loser. And you should be grateful I'm the one handling it. You'd bankrupt them." I remember my throat closing up. This weird disconnect between seeing my name and knowing viscerally that I had never written those sentences. It felt like watching footage of a stranger in your body. "Where did you get this?" I asked, voice too calm. Mom gestured to Claire, who curled in on herself further. "She didn't want to show us at first," Mom said. "She wanted to protect you, but we had to know. Sophie, how could you?" I looked at Claire. She met my eyes just for a second. There was a flicker there, something like satisfaction quickly buried under hurt. "You've always thought you were better than me," she whispered. "I've put up with it. But trying to steal the house, that's too much. Something in me, aligned. That's the only way I can describe it. All the tiny moments over the years where she'd twisted narratives, all the times I'd let myself be cast as the villain in her dramas because fighting back felt like more trouble than it was worth. They lined up like dominoes. And this time, instead of letting them topple in my direction, I reached into my bag. "Okay," I said. "Fine. If we're putting everything on the table, let's actually put it on the table. The thing about being the organized one is that it makes people underestimate you in a different way. They think your thoroughness is just fussy, not strategic." When Claire had sent that, "So you've finally made your move" text, my stomach had flipped, but my brain had kicked into gear. I hadn't known exactly what she was going to do, but I knew her patterns. Push a story, cry first, rely on Mom's instinct to protect. So I'd gone looking. First, I'd logged into my email on my laptop. There was no record of that message to the solicitor in my sent folder, obviously. But I used two-factor authentication. Anytime I log in on a new device, I get a ping. 2 days after the solicitor appointment, there had been a login attempt from an unknown IP address that Google had flagged. I'd thought it was a glitch at the time and ignored it. Now it clicked. Second, I'd called the solicitor's office. I'd asked, as neutrally as I could, whether they'd received any further communication from me. The assistant checked. "Just the one from your sister," she'd said. "My sister?" I'd asked. "Yes," she said. "Claire. She emailed with some concerns about the will. Said you'd agreed she should get control because you were tired of being the only responsible one." My entire body had gone cold. I'd asked them to forward the email. When it came through, I saw that Claire had used an address that looked a lot like mine. Same first name, extra number, different domain. She'd signed it Sophie and referred to herself as my sister. It was clumsy, but to someone not paying close attention, plausible. Third, I'd backed up my WhatsApp. I know you can fake screenshots. I also know that the app stores logs. I'd exported my chat with Claire from my phone to my laptop. In my version, the messages she was showing our parents did not exist. Finally, and this is the part I felt weird about even as I did it, I'd asked our cousin Liz if we could talk. Liz is one of the few relatives who sees Claire clearly. We'd grown closer over the last few years, partly because she'd been on the receiving end of some of Claire's smaller storms. "I think she's gearing up for something," I'd told Liz over coffee. "You think?" Liz had snorted. Then she'd hesitated. "She sent me a rant the other night. I wasn't going to tell you because I didn't want to stir it, but you should probably see it." She'd forwarded me the voice note Claire had sent at 2 a.m., clearly after a few wines. In it, Claire ranted about how everyone worships Sophie because she bought a tiny shoebox, and how unfair it was that Mom and Dad were listening to her about everything now. Then the kicker. Maybe if I show them what she's really like, they'll stop acting like she's some saint. I'm sick of being the screw-up. Let her be the bad guy for once. Liz had also sent screenshots of their text exchange. In them, Claire explicitly mentioned changing the will, talking about convincing them Sophie's trying to cut me out, so that they'll finally see how two-faced she is. Liz's responses were a mix of, "This is not a good idea," and "You're going to regret this." I printed everything. I put it in a cheap plastic folder. I put that folder in my bag before I went to my parents' house for lunch, because some part of me was done walking into these situations unarmed. Back to the living room. Everyone is looking at me like they're expecting a confession or a meltdown. Instead, I slide the folder onto the coffee table next to the doctored printouts. "First," I say, and my voice is still calm, weirdly so. "Here is the email I actually sent to the solicitor." I pull out the printout of the brief message I'd sent thanking them for their time and confirming that Mom and Dad wanted to keep everything 50-50. I highlight the line. They would like the house to be left equally to both daughters. The date and timestamp are visible. Dad leans forward, squinting. "Where did you get this?" "From my sent folder," I say. "From my email, the one I use, the only one." "Then what's this?" Mom gestures at the other printout. "That," I say, "did not come from my account. I know because I have two-factor authentication set up. Here." I slide my phone over, already open on the security activity page. "See? One login on my phone. No other devices, no one else has my password, and if they tried to log in, it'd ping me." They don't really understand the tech, I can see it, but they understand enough to know that there's doubt now. The certainty that I did this wobbles a little. "Second," I say, pulling out another page, "is the email the solicitor forwarded me after I called them. This one is from Claire's email address. Not mine. See the difference?" I point out the address. Same first name, extra numbers, different provider. In it, she refers to herself as my sister. She signs it with my name. Dad's face goes very still. Mom looks between Claire and the printout. Claire has gone pale under her fake tan. "That's not..." she starts. "Don't," I say, sharper now. "Please don't lie to my face as well as behind my back." Mom opens her mouth, closes it. "Claire?" she says, voice small. "It was a mistake," Claire blurts. "I was just trying to clarify things. You know how Sophie can be? She steamrolls." "No," I cut in. "No more of that. You told them I was trying to cut you out. You told them I'd gone behind their backs. You showed them fake messages." I pull out the printed export of our WhatsApp chat. Here is our actual conversation. There is no version where I call you irresponsible or say you'll only get money if I approve. You made those up. Mum blurts. Screenshots can be doctored, like she just learned the phrase yesterday. Exactly, I say, which is why yours don't match the chat logs. There is a long, awful silence. The kind that makes you aware of every sound in the room, the ticking clock, the distant buzz of a lawnmower outside, the faint wheeze of the old fridge. Claire's eyes fill with tears, but this time the performance is slightly off. I was scared, she says. You always get everything. They trust you with everything. I thought that if you made me look like a thief, they'd... What? Hand you the house out of pity? My voice cracks on the last word. The hurt that's been simmering for years pushes up through the anger. You could have talked to me, or to them. Instead, you tried to blow up my relationship with our parents. She opens her mouth, but Dad holds up a hand. Is it true? He asks, in a tone I've rarely heard from him. Did you send that email? Did you make up those messages? Claire's eyes dart around, looking for the usual exits. There aren't any left. Finally, she mutters, I might have. Exaggerated. But she was going to take control of everything, Dad. She always does. I figured if you saw... Stop, he says. Just that. But the word lands with the weight of all the times he didn't say it before. Mum sinks back on the couch, tissue crumpled in her hand. She looks at me like she's seeing me for the first time in a long time, not just the role I play. Why didn't you tell us? She whispers. About the email. About calling the solicitor. I did tell you. I say. I told you I thought you should keep it equal. I told you I'd go with you to take notes. I did exactly what you asked and then bent over backwards to make sure Claire wasn't cut out of anything. The only thing I didn't anticipate was that she'd get so jealous she'd try to burn me at the stake to feel better. The words hang there, harsh. True. Mom starts to cry. Not the angry, scolding tears I'm used to, but this quiet, exhausted crying that makes her look suddenly old. Dad puts a hand over his face. Claire is still clutching her tissue, but the performance has slipped. She looks cornered. I reach into the folder one more time. There's one more thing, I say. Liz didn't want to get involved, but she sent me this because she thought I should know what you were planning. I play the voice note from my phone, not loudly, just enough. Claire's own voice fills the room, slurred with whine, complaining that I'm their little angel and saying, maybe if I show them what she's really like, they'll stop acting like she's some saint. Let her be the bad guy for once. When it ends, no one speaks for a long time. Finally, I say quietly, I am not a saint. I'm not perfect. I've messed up. But I have never once tried to turn you two against Claire. Not when she stole my boyfriend. Not when she crashed Mom's car. Not when you used my education fund to bail her out of her lease. I swallowed it. I told myself that's what family does. But this? I gesture at the mess on the table. This is beyond anything I can justify as just Claire being Claire. Claire bursts into tears properly now. I'm sorry, okay? She sobs. Is that what you want? I'm sorry. I was drunk. I was angry. I didn't think it would go this far. You've been doing this your whole life, I say. This is just the first time you've left a paper trail. Dad looks at me, then at her. You need to leave, he says to Claire, voice shaking. Go home. We'll talk about this later. She stares at him, stunned. She's not used to being the one sent away. For a second, I see the kid who scraped her knee in the driveway, wailing for Mum. Then she grabs her bag and storms out, the front door slamming so hard a picture frame rattles. The silence that follows feels like an overlong exhale. Mum turns to me, eyes red. Sophie, she starts. I'm tired, I say, before she can launch into whatever mix of apology and justification she has brewing. I am so tired. I'm tired of walking into rooms already on the back foot because of something Claire's said. I'm tired of having to bring evidence to prove I'm not the villain in stories I didn't even know I was in. We didn't know. Dad says hoarsely. We should have. We should have checked. You believed the kid who cried first, I say. You've been doing it since we were children. I don't expect you to rewrite 25 years of that in an afternoon, but I needed you to see it at least once without me being the one on trial. Mum reaches for my hand. I let her hold it because despite everything, I still love her. We're so sorry, she says. We messed up. We just thought, you're strong. You can handle things. Claire always seemed like she needed more. I do handle things, I say. That doesn't mean I don't need anything. We talk for a long time. It's messy and stops and starts. There are apologies that land and some that don't. There are questions I don't have neat answers to, like, how do we fix this? And can you forgive her? I say I don't know, because I genuinely don't. What I do know, as I pack up my folder and finally stand to leave, is that something fundamentally shifted. Not in them, they're still my parents, with all their blind spots. But in me. I'm done accepting the role of silent, steady scapegoat. In the days that follow, the fallout spreads. Claire texts me long, alternating walls of you ruined my relationship with them, and you always wanted them to hate me. I don't respond to most of them. I send one message saying, you did that to yourself. Then mute the thread. Mum calls tentatively to ask if I can come over for dinner. I agree, but with conditions. If we're going to talk about this, I say, it has to be all three of us. And no more ambushes. If you have an issue with me, you tell me before you build a whole case based on whatever Claire says. We understand, she says. I don't know if they fully do, but she's trying. We start small. They ask more questions now instead of assuming. Dad will say, your sister told us X? Is that true? And I'll actually get a chance to answer before they reach for tissues. It's awkward. It's not some Hallmark redemption arc, but it's a start. As for Claire and me, we're not speaking. I grieved that more than I expected. For all the chaos she brought, she's still my sister. We shared bunk beds and secrets and the same cheap shampoo for years. Losing the fantasy of what she could have been hurts. But what hurts more is how willing she was to torch my life to feel less small in hers. That's not something you fix with a single sobbed sorry. I've put boundaries around myself that would have felt selfish a few years ago. I stopped loaning money I resented lending. I stopped dropping everything to chase whatever fire Claire had set. I stopped showing up to every family gathering without question. When Mom hints that it would be nice if you and your sister could just be normal, I say, normal for us was me being her scapegoat. I'm not going back to that. There's a strange kind of peace in knowing I have receipts now, not just literal ones in a folder, but a mental record that I am not crazy, not overreacting, not remembering wrong. For so long, Claire's version of events won by default because she was faster and louder. One afternoon with some emails and voice notes didn't turn her into a different person, but it turned the tables enough that my parents had to look at the mess square on instead of through her chosen framing. My sister's jealousy made her lie about me. For years, it bent my life into shapes that made her more comfortable. For once, though, I had the proof and the spine to push back. I don't know exactly what our family will look like in 5 years, whether Claire and I will ever sit in the same room without a mediator. But I do know this. I am no longer willing to live in a story someone else writes for me, especially when their pen is dipped in envy.